welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take, well, a whole stack of information. Could be articles, research, sometimes just our own notes, and we really try to pull out the key nuggets. The goal is always to give you a shortcut, basically, to getting properly informed. Cut through the noise, find those surprising details, and hopefully keep you hooked. Today we're diving into something really compelling, maybe a bit unsettling actually. We're looking at a strategic note called ATZLAN, America's Post-Collapse Cartography and Conflict. It's dated October 2030. And this thing, it lays out a pretty dire vision. We're talking systemic collapse in the West, but specifically it zooms right in on the disintegration of the United States.
Yeah, what's really striking about this particular source is just how detailed it is. It maps out this hypothetical future step by step, the events, the consequences of this kind of breakdown. So our mission today really is to explore the mechanics of how this collapse could happen, according to the document anyway. What forces does it say are at play, and what underlying insights can we maybe pull from this what-if scenario just to help you get informed on its specific projections?
Okay, so let's unpack this. Where does it start? The source points to a specific catalyst, right? Something it calls 11 September 2.0.
That's right. The inciting incident, according to this note, happens on September 11th, 2030, the 29th anniversary of 9/11, obviously. A series of coordinated explosions hit North America.
Coordinated explosions. Where exactly? What were the targets mentioned?
Well, they seem quite strategic. There's an electrical power plant in Arizona, the Federal Data Hub out in San Jose, California, FEMA headquarters in Denver, and even a secondary military base in New Mexico. So quite widespread and hitting critical points.
Okay, and right away, this is where it gets murky, isn't it? The official story, the note says, points the finger at a radical Islamist coalition backed by rogue states.
Exactly. But almost immediately, the document describes massive leaks starting to surface, alternative analyses popping up everywhere, suggesting a false flag operation. Internal complicity.
Wow. So the result is just total informational chaos, as the note puts it. It's hard to even wrap your head around that level of confusion, that immediate distrust.
And that really highlights one of the core ideas in this document, I think. In a world that's already super connected, maybe super polarized, the first thing to break in a crisis isn't just, the power grid. It's our shared sense of what's true. The real battleground becomes perception itself. Who you believe dictates who you're loyal to, what you do next. And that just fuels the deeper divisions.
Divisions, yeah. And speaking of internal divisions, especially within, say, the military or government structures, the document brings up something listeners might remember causing a stir years ago, Jade Helm.
Ah, yes. Jade Helm 15. That big military exercise back in 2015 across multiple states. The strategic note says it was reportedly redeployed in 2029, but under a new name, Operation Continental Shield.
Okay, and the stated goal?
The stated goal was pretty straightforward. Test the resilience of the armed forces in case of multi-front internal insurrection. Seems, like contingency planning.
But the source claims there was more to it.
That's the assertion. The source claims this exercise was secretly reactivated, really, as a program to neutralize potential internal separatist groups. And here's the kicker. By 2030, it alleges, this operation had been infiltrated by hostile elements.
Infiltrated, meaning its objectives were changed mid-operation.
Fundamentally altered, yeah, that's the claim. So a tool designed, supposedly for defense, was effectively turned against its original purpose, weaponized from the inside.
So how does that actually play out on the ground in this scenario? What happens next?
Well, the immediate impact described is chaos within the military itself. Federal troops are caught between contradictory orders, different command chains pulling them in different directions.
Can you give examples? Does it mention specific places?
It does. It specifically names places like El Paso, Lubbock, Fort Huachuca, military bases where there's either outright secession or partial mutiny. Some units, the note says, actually start aligning with local governors or these new autonomous coalitions forming.
So it's a complete breakdown of central military authority.
Exactly. And it underscores a key vulnerability, doesn't it? Command structures rely entirely on shared trust and clear, unified objectives. The moment those are compromised, the note suggests you don't just get disorder, you get a rapid realignment. Loyalty shifts based on who people perceive the real enemy to be now.
Which kind of sets the stage for this ATZLAN entity to emerge, right?
Yeah.
Amidst all the chaos and the military fracturing, this idea of ATZLAN, this ancestral homeland claimed by some Chicano nationalist groups, it makes a comeback.
A major resurgence, yeah. And it's not just an abstract idea in the document. It details how it starts taking real shape.
What kind of groups are involved according to the source?
It describes a really strange mix.
Yeah.
You have formerly maybe marginal groups like Mecca, that's the Chicano student movement, suddenly fusing with elements of, get this, the Sinaloa cartel, plus local militias and even groups disguised as transborder cultural NGOs.
That's quite the coalition. Cartels and student activists and NGOs.
An unlikely and, frankly, pretty disturbing alliance, yeah. And this coalition, the note claims, forms the Popular Republic of ATZLAN. It's this blend of ideology, criminal enterprise, and paramilitary capability.
And this republic is proclaimed unofficially, it says, in September 2030. Where does it claim territory?
It covers a huge swath of land, from Southern California across to Southern Texas, and it explicitly includes areas with large Hispanic populations, places like El Paso, Tucson, San Diego are mentioned. It's an immediate redrawing of the map, at least in their declaration.
Does it just spring up on its own, or does the source mention outside help?
Oh, definitely not on its own. The note points to a pretty significant support network. Externally, it talks about flows of weapons, crypto funding,
Yeah.
coming from places like Venezuela, Iran, even branches of North Korean intelligence.
So serious state-level backing, potentially. Enabling what?
Enabling ATZLAN, the document claims, to field technologically advanced paramilitary forces. This isn't just, guys with old rifles.
Right, so it's far beyond just a grassroots thing. What about internally? What does the note say about, say, Mexico's role?
That's interesting, too. The official Mexican government apparently stays silent. Publicly, anyway. But the source claims that behind the scenes, retired Mexican generals, some local governors, are discreetly supporting the ATZLAN claim. They see it as a historic opportunity, is the phrase used.
Wow. So it's this incredibly complex web. External state actors, non-state groups like cartels, internal factions within a neighboring country, all converging.
It really paints a picture of modern conflict, doesn't it? Multi-layered, hybrid, not just armies facing off, but exploiting existing fault lines, leveraging influence, finding common cause in a power vacuum.
Okay, so the U.S. is fracturing. The note then lays out this new map of conflict, right? 3 main zones.
That's right. It describes the architecture of this dislocation. First, you've got the Californian Pacific Bloc.
How's that characterized?
As technocratic and independentist. And interestingly, the note says it's supported by AI firms and unnamed Asian powers.
Okay, Zone 1. What's Zone 2?
Zone 2 is the new Southern Confederacy. Think Texas, Florida, Tennessee. This bloc is described very differently. Militarily powerful, far-right pro-federal, and supported by evangelical networks and oil interests.
Very different ideological base there. And the third zone?
That's the autonomous zone of ATZLAN itself, the Southwest Front. The source calls this a narco-ideological hybrid ethno-nationalist, and really leveraging those cross-border populations and connections we talked about.
So 3 very distinct competing power centers emerging from the fragmentation.
Exactly. And it's crucial to understand this internal U.S. collapse, as the document portrays it, it doesn't happen in isolation. It triggers huge geopolitical shifts globally.
Like what are the international repercussions described?
Well, the European Union, for instance, is basically paralyzed. The note mentions a wave of cyber-terrorist attacks hitting Europe, combined with budgetary disobedience among member states. It effectively stops functioning as a coherent military entity.
That's massive, a huge blow to the whole Western alliance structure.
Absolutely. Then it says the United Kingdom permanently withdraws from all multilateral operations, pulls back completely, and Israel, finding itself facing an open regional war, halts its cyber cooperation programs with the U.S. You see this rapid unraveling of alliances.
The ripple effect is just enormous. It's not just an American crisis. It's framed as a global one.
Precisely. The note suggests it's a fundamental breakdown of the entire post-World War II Western order, triggered by the internal strife within its core power.
So, as the West is kind of imploding here, what does the source say about the rest of the world? This new world order, or maybe the lack of one?
Well, first, there's the immediate economic fallout. The note highlights the collapse of the U.S. dollar. And in these new autonomous zones like ATZLAN, cryptocurrency becomes the only reliable unit of exchange, a total shift in finance.
And geopolitically, who fills the vacuum?
Regional powers step in: China, Turkey, Iran, Russia. They're described as disputing influence over the fragments of what used to be NATO space. It's like a return to a much more volatile, multipolar world, maybe marked by intense regional competition.
And there's one more consequence mentioned that's just terrifying. the nuclear issue.
Ah, yes. That's perhaps the most chilling part. The source states that American nuclear bases become open targets, and it explicitly mentions real risks of uncontrolled proliferation.
Loose nukes, that's the ultimate nightmare scenario, isn't it?
It really is, and it implicitly raises this huge question about, the long-term security of nuclear weapons when the state controlling them collapses. It suggests that a nation's internal stability isn't just its own business. It's a global security necessity, especially when nuclear weapons are involved.
The note finishes with this quite powerful reflection, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About the American dream.
It does. It concludes that the dream, quote, did not die suddenly, but from a progressive infiltration patiently orchestrated by hybrid enemies, both internal and external.
Hybrid enemies.
Yeah.
Who understood something crucial about modern conflict.
Exactly. Who understood, the note says, that the 21st century would be a war of narratives, structures, and internal alliances, not a war of tanks. It shifts the whole focus away from traditional military might as the ultimate deciding factor.
It really emphasizes that the key vulnerabilities identified in this scenario weren't primarily tanks or planes, but systemic ones: societal divisions, information control.
Yeah, it points to a strategy of exploiting those internal fault lines, manipulating narratives, using alliances of convenience, all to achieve strategic goals without necessarily needing a conventional invasion.
So let's just recap this deep dive. The strategic note, ATZLAN, gives us this vision of, a fractured America, broken into competing zones, pulled apart by internal conflicts, manipulated by external forces, a mosaic, not a monolith. It really makes you think about societal resilience or fragility.
What particularly stood out to you as we went through this scenario? Was there one element that really struck you?
For me, I think it was that closing line about the American dream not being killed by tanks, but by this war of narratives, structures, and internal alliances. Just hammers home how vulnerable these complex systems we live in might be to ideas, to information, to internal fractures. What about you?
I agree with that. And maybe connected to it, the way the document portrays how seemingly marginal groups or ideas can suddenly gain immense power when central authority weakens, and how external players can pour fuel on those embers. It's this fragile dance between internal cohesion and external pressures, isn't it?
It really is. So the final thought to leave you with, perhaps, what is this particular scenario? Okay, it's hypothetical, but what does it illuminate about the real vulnerabilities of complex societies today? And the potential power of these hybrid forces, internal and external, to maybe reshape the world in ways we haven't fully grasped. Something to think about until our next deep dive.